and for pregnant women. Premier Danielle Smith believes that Albertans should have the freedom to choose whether to receive mRNA vaccines. In your professional opinion, do you agree or disagree with this stance, and why?
I disagree, and I'll tell you why. It's actually quite simple. If as a physician, right now I recommended a COVID vaccine for a baby as young as 6 months old, or for a pregnant woman, I would be committing medical malpractice, because there is more than enough scientific evidence of harm to show that, for example, in the VAERS reporting system, there are over 500 children who have died after taking a Pfizer or Moderna vaccine. The youngest child who died after taking a Pfizer vaccine was 5 months old. The youngest child who died after taking a Moderna vaccine was 1 year old. There are children who have died in their crib, who were discovered dead by their parents in their crib 24 hours after taking a Pfizer vaccine, 48 hours, 72 hours. There's temporal correlation in many of these cases. And as I mentioned, there are over 500 deaths, child deaths, in the VAERS reporting system. That's not to count all the cancers that I've seen in children that have had these vaccines who are now developing leukemias. They're developing glioblastomas, they're developing sarcomas. And as I mentioned, in pregnancy, I've seen many pregnant women who've had COVID vaccines suffer cardiac arrests. They've had blood clots, they've suffered miscarriages, stillbirths. They have heavy bleeding during delivery. Some of them have died during delivery, and some have died shortly after delivery, and again, from blood clots. And as I mentioned earlier, there's now evidence from Freedom of Information requests that Health Canada actually never approved these vaccines for use in pregnancy because there was not enough evidence for safety. And so I would be committing medical malpractice. Now, when a politician like Premier Danielle Smith says, we give parents the choice, I strongly disagree with that statement. In order to have choice in taking a pharmaceutical product, you have to have full informed consent. You have to be told all the risks and all the benefits. And right now, the colleges are preventing doctors from telling patients the risks. So you don't have informed consent. And if you don't have informed consent, you don't have choice. So Premier Smith is wrong on this, and I would strongly advise her advisors, do not say that Alberta parents have a choice. Alberta parents don't have a choice. They don't have informed consent. You're literally telling Albertans that they have a choice to inject a toxic, contaminated pharmaceutical product into their children that the doctors, Alberta doctors, are lying to parents about because they have to keep their jobs and keep their medical licenses. That's not choice.
Thank you, Dr. Makis. Dr. Shoemaker, in your professional opinion, what immediate actions, so like you said, we've seen the right amount of talk, and we've seen the right amount of, if you will, sentiment, but maybe not as much action as Dr. Makis has alluded to. So in your professional opinion, what immediate actions should the Danielle Smith government take regarding AHS?
Regarding AHS, I don't feel that I should comment on that. I'm not from Alberta. Dr. Makis is right on the truth, on the concerns. He's expressed it more than well enough. If you have a third question, I'd be able to answer that one, but I think that answer has been well dealt with by Dr. Makis.
I like it. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that very much, Dr. William. Well, perhaps a question for both of you then on that note, and what we've seen over the last 4 years, how would one, here we've showed up, and again, it's an incredible amount of respect for everybody in this room. You took the time, you could have been at home, and you showed up. How does one engage with both the medical and the political community to express opinions like the ones that you've mentioned today?
How does one engage? Well, you can write letters. I wrote letters to every premier in Canada all through September, October of 2022 with the concerns and the things that we'd learned even at that point. Not a single one was answered from not a single premier in any Canadian province. But letter writing should still be done. You should still write about your loved partner or aunt or uncle who passed away 15 minutes after the jab. The lady who collapsed in Saskatchewan, dead as a doornail because she was doing her best to protect her friends and the like. But here's the deal, you can put it in your letters. The Cleveland Clinic, in a 4-month study, proved that the more jabs you got, the more you were going to get COVID. So it was all a scam because it damages your immune system and doesn't specifically protect you from COVID. You get more COVID, you get more respiratory syncytial virus, you get more of everything with a damaged immune system. So what we have to say is that the jabs are hurting us. We've seen the hurt, we can't stand the hurt any longer. That's what I'd ask you to say in your letters.
And Dr. Makis, to conclude this.
I think personal stories are extremely important, and it's important to speak out and speak out publicly. We know, for example, that a young mother, Kayla Pollock, she was paralyzed from Ontario. She was paralyzed after the booster shot, and she wasn't offered vaccine injury treatment.
Which I could have provided, or any Ontario physician could have provided if we were allowed to provide such treatments. But unfortunately, such treatments often do include ivermectin in a very specific protocol, very different from when you have COVID-19. But no doctor is doing it because, well, the people have the blinders on. Back to you, William, sorry.
And imagine that, she could have been treated by Dr. Shoemaker, she could have been treated by Dr. Mark Trozzi, doctors who, kept their wits about them during the pandemic, recognized all the fraud that we were subjected to. Instead, you know what she was offered? She was offered medical assistance in dying. And she was offered that repeatedly by her doctors. Well, the story got out, and now Canadians know about her tragic story. There was a story recently about an Ontario man who was approved for MAID, and he now died. And again, he had suffered vaccine injury, again after 3 vaccines, wasn't offered any kind of treatment. However, he went to his doctors convinced him that medical assistance in dying was the way to go. He was approved, and now he has sort of proceeded with that program and ended his life. These stories need to get out. One thing I learned about my battles with AHS over the many years is that there's nothing that these corrupt healthcare bureaucrats love more than people suffering in silence and not exposing what they've done to us. So I think it's extremely important to share your stories. Your stories may be more important than you realize. You may be helping save somebody else's life. You may be helping save somebody else's child. Look at Dan Hartman. Look at Dan Hartman and how hard he is fighting for his 17-year-old boy, Sean, who died 1 month after taking the Pfizer vaccine. When I look at Dan Hartman, I see that's a parent. That is a parent. That's what all the parents should have been doing. All the parents should have been fighting for their kids that hard instead of rolling over and say, okay, fine, I'll inject my child with the 2 shots. We need to be public about our stories.
That's brilliant, important. Isn't it interesting that Dr. Makis knows so well from Alberta 2 stories from Ontario. And here I am, a doctor from Ontario with my doctor colleague from Alberta. We each know about the suffering and the pain in each other's province. But I would just like to give one last message to Premier Smith. We all know about long COVID. We all think, it's the people who got COVID originally and it happened to last a long time in their bodies, and then they started to get a lot of brain fog and a lot of fatigue, and maybe they got strange rashes and they just can't get over anything. You know who gets long COVID? A person who's allowed to have a long evidence of COVID in their body. In other words, the COVID itself is allowed to last 15 days, 45 days, 95 days. It's a crummy, long, terrible COVID. Well, guess what, dear politicians across Canada? It's untreated COVID. Treated COVID lasts 4 days. I was better in 4 days. That anecdote I was giving about myself, taking some ivermectin to save myself, the antigen test was negative, William, in 4 days. I felt fine in 4 days, but I did feel horrible on days 1 and 2. And the normal light dose of ivermectin that I took to save my life also prevented me from getting long COVID, because my COVID experience was short. So politicians and bureaucrats and public health folks, stop long COVID by allowing us to use appropriate medications. William and I know what the medicines are. We've said the names and the words long enough. Do you not think it should be in the actual hands of doctors who are free to prescribe it, as opposed to doctors who are not free to prescribe it? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Makis and Dr. Shoemaker. Thank you, gentlemen.